Buenos días a todos. Yo, como os podéis imaginar, estoy súper feliz.
Well, as you can imagine, I am really happy to be here today, this event with three great women, not just because of them, but because what they represent. I am happy to see some students among the audience. Hello, because I have some students. I would like to greet my students from transition and justice subject. And this is going to be informal, but we're going to convey much information to you. You know that democracies in Southern Europe are celebrating our anniversary, our transition to democracy. It started last year, but there is no consensus as to when that transition started out. And we have very interesting cases, three interesting cases coming from dictatorships with different transitions in each case. And this is a very enriching experience. I was lucky to spend 1 year in Portugal last year on the occasion of the commemoration of the Carnation Revolution. And many people ask me, is Spain celebrating the end of the dictatorship next year, so 2025? So in November 2025 will be the 50th anniversary of Franco's death. And that was very interesting because we all tend to compare, and I was able to compare my experiences. I also have traveled extensively throughout Latin America. And when I was telling my colleagues that one of the first trial against the dictatorships was the trial, many people think that the first trial against military dictatorship was in Argentina because we forget the Greek case. We tend to forget the recent past, and sometimes we don't know about some states measures that sometimes have been taken to try and understand what people have made about this kind of dictatorships in the past, in this recent past. So I'm going to introduce these three women. Many of you may know them. I have Carmina Gostran, the commissioner for Spain in Liberty, 50 years, the one in the middle, and then Sirago Tsiaras, the director of the National Library in Greece and the commissioner of the exhibition Democracy, and then Marina Inácia Rezola, the commissioner for the 50th anniversary of the Carnation Revolution in Portugal. As you know, a woman put a carnation flower in one of the rifles used by the military, and that became the very symbol of that revolution. And the woman who did that recently died. So I'm going to propose some questions, and then we will have some time for a discussion, and you will be able to make some questions too. So the first question is, why the need for a commemoration? You know that some politicians or citizens think that this is not a reason to commemorate. This is just the past, and we might have different experiences about it. Our dictator died, but in Argentina, the celebration is about the coup d'etat on the 24th of March. In some other countries, well, in Portugal, there was a revolution. So my question is, why commemorate? Why don't we want to live the past as is? Carmina, you want to go first? So, marketing people love having these kind of events with three people together. And that's why we thought this would be interesting. We wanted to let people know about three different cases and the different people who got involved in the transition, feminist movements, the citizens. We wanted to get to know, and we wanted to celebrate, and we wanted to discuss. We are celebrating that we are better off than 50 years ago. That doesn't mean everything is perfect, of course. That's why we want a discussion too. We want to discuss where we are going, where we are heading to, what we want, and these three elements are important. Sirago?
To commemorate, and we have to remember, because memory is a part of our identity, is a part of what we are now in the present. It's not only about what happened in the past, but what happened in the past constructs us as civil citizens, as members of a civil society in the present and in the future. And it's not only about, the experiences of older generations and what they went through in order to restore democracy after the 7 years of dictatorship in Greece. But it is the fact that democracy is something that we have always to defend and to work for. It is an everyday life practice, every common practice. So I believe that memory is a very crucial element for our identity in the present. And it's something that it's not only educational and historical and artistic, but it is a part of our civil society and the values that we have to defend. Because even now, nothing is for granted. Even if we have 50 years of democracy in Greece, and we talk about all the successes and the failures and all the evolutions and the progresses we had in our evolution, in our financial life, how we became members of the European community. But all these values are not granted. They are something that we have always to defend and think about.
De acuerdo con lo que ha dicho, buenos días a todos. Entonces,
With my colleagues, good morning, everyone. My Spanish is not perfect, but I try my best. So it's about an achievement or a conquest. The democracy we want to achieve and how history is important for us to try and achieve a better democracy. In Portugal, the 25th of April is much more than a symbol because it was the achievement of freedom, the start of democracy. This is something that we need to fight for every day. I totally agree. It was also the end of the colonial empire, one of the vastest ones, and also the construction of a fairer society, because Portugal has changed a lot since then. And for example, we've run several surveys, the last one last year, and there is a vast consensus on the Portuguese society about that date. It is much more than a historic date. 83% of the respondents said that the way the transition was made in Portugal is a source of pride. More than 50% of the respondents said that Portugal became better thanks to the 25th of April, and that the 25th of April was the most important event in our history. The second most important event was the European Union, or our adhesion to the European Union. But the 25th of April is the most important one. It is something that Portuguese population see with pride. So commemorating and celebrating the 25th of April is a source of pride. They want to celebrate those who made it possible, the elites, the military, and the program with the 3 Ds: democracy, decolonization, and development. And instead of just waiting for the regime to fall, they took to the streets and they made it possible. They actively made it happen. This is what we celebrate on the 25th of April. Thank you. I am gonna use some of the things you said, and I also want to talk about how you more or less talked about the youth. So you said that in Portugal, 83% of the respondents said that they are proud of the transition, whatever that means. Transition is not the same in each of the 3 countries. transition through a reform or transition through a break is not the same. We are proud of our transition here in Spain too, but our transition had entailed some problems that are still seen here in democratic times. For example, truth, memory, reparation. Do you think states have made an effort to communicate what they've done? I don't know about Portugal or Greece or even in Spain. Do people know what was made, what wasn't made? Or action or omission? I don't know whether in Portugal there is a truth commission in the Black Book, trials. I don't know if people are really aware of the efforts made by the states, what it entailed and what they should be proud about. Or in Greece and Portugal, have you explained it sufficiently to the new generations? This is what we did. This is what the consequences were. And this is what it entailed to the victims and the casualties. This is the textbook my daughter used in Portugal because she was enrolled in a Spanish high school, and this is the textbook she used. And for example, this book talks about, for example, freedom of speech, political prisons, the police, the international police, torture, censorship. And then there were some practical activities. For example, they needed to talk about the situation in Portugal and a comparison with other countries that are not respecting human rights. So it is done in an effort to connect the present with the past. This is nowhere to be found in Spain. In Spain, you won't find textbooks that talk about this so explicitly. So this is a great teaching effort made in Portugal. So, for example, when the younger generations think about or hear about dictatorship or fascism or lack of freedom of speech, do the younger generations really know what that means? Because maybe they're taking democracy for granted because we haven't taught them what it was like in the past. So what did the states do in your countries regarding teaching policies or not? Because if we don't do that, I don't know if you know the book about by Levitsky, How Democracies Die. So why do democracies have to die? We're taking it for granted. Democracy might not continue. This cannot be taken for granted. Some consolidated democracies are struggling now. So what do you think the state has done or what we should be doing further to communicate this to the younger generations?
Already mentioned was part of my thought when I was thinking about this exhibition about democracy at the National Gallery of Greece. I mean, I believe that there is a lack of education in the young generations, not only about recent history, Greek and global history, but even in the political values of democracy. Of course, during the year, there is a festivity in Greek schools and Greek society about the uprising of the students in the Polytechnic School in the 17th of November, 1973, so 1 year before the collapse of the junta. And this is a very specific period where there are discussions, where documentaries are shown, the public opinion talks, the discourse has a lot of festivities around this subject. But I believe this is not enough. And even when I was preparing this exhibition, I thought that during the time that we are going through, that the democracy is not taken for granted, or there are a lot of menaces, a lot of dangers all around the world, not only in Europe, but this is a global problem. All these problems that have to do with the question of human rights, the question not only of gender equality, but even of the lower classes problems, financial problems, and the extra rises all over Europe and the world. So this is a question of education for the young generations that I believe is one of our major responsibilities, people who work in public institutions. And through this exhibition, I realized that young people can connect with history through the image, through the artwork, maybe easier than through the text, than through the written history and the documents. So the representation of historical facts has to do with the sentiments, not only the information, but the sentiments and the experiences and the traumatic experiences, because democracy is not only a festivity of freedom, but it is a process of the trauma in the same time. So I believe that the art world, not only contemporary artists, but even older ones, and not only visual arts, but theater, film, music, all the cultural activities around these values is very important for a wider expression of education. And this is something we should defend as political subjects and in cultural institutions that are supposed to work for the public interest. So this is an open question, and it gets more and more important as time goes by.
Te hago una preguntita. En tu exposición sobre democracia, las escuelas hacían el esfuerzo.
Did schools visit it? Because I think it was interesting. Sometimes exhibitions do not reach the younger generations. Did you organize, did you incentivize or encourage school visits, something like that?
I'm not very sure that I understand everything that you asked me now, because I wasn't listening to the translation, but you were talking about my position as the director of the National Gallery.
You incentivize that young people can go there.
Yes, of course. We pay a lot of attention and we work very hard for the educational programs, not only for the school classes that come to the National Gallery, but we produce educational programs where parents and children can work together. And this is very important. And even grandparents and grandchildren can work together, or open courses for families or for friends that we offer, so that processing art and expressing themselves, writing a story or making a collage, for example, they can put themselves inside the history. And inside, you have to find a way to make processes of identification. So I believe that art is very crucial in that process, that you become part of a history, of a tradition, and you find yourself in the context of history and art expression.
Yo me temo que en España incluyen ese tipo de temas. En primaria, desde luego que no, y en secundaria sí que están en el currículum, pero llegan mucho más tarde. Entonces, hay alumnos que si dejan secundaria pronto, nunca van a verse, digamos, ¿no? en el contexto de poder saber más sobre estos temas. También me gustaría decir que no creo que sea solamente una cosa de currículum, ¿no? Porque es verdad que el currículo al final también se puede tergiversar, el profesor puede llegar o no puede llegar. Y ahí sí que estoy muy de acuerdo con lo que decía Sirago, de que no se trata solamente de hablar de la dictadura franquista o hablar de la transición, sino que también debe haber una docencia o un esfuerzo pedagógico para hablar de lo que es la democracia, ¿no? En contraste con eso. Y que nos faltan herramientas a veces para que esa democracia permee en las instituciones educativas o que permee en la vida cotidiana.
educational institutions. So we need more of that material through films, exhibitions, artifacts, theater. The power of culture is critical for us to be able to disseminate and educate. And as we said, we have to be able to tell this to the people and the rest of the society. And sometimes academia does not make an effort to disseminate it. But sometimes we demand too much from our historians and our academia in general, because they have to be good disseminators, they have to be good teachers, good professors, good researchers. Sometimes they just can cope with all of that. And so we should try to find the solution and how to think about how to make good works available to everyone. For example, we have to work together with the Ministry for Universities and the Ministry for Education to make it more publicly available. Yes, I would like to delve on what she said about dissemination. You know that the Commissioner's Office has opened up an Instagram profile, 50 in Libertad, 50 in Liberty, in an effort to talk to a younger audience through the influencers, and they use their own language. We boomers, for example, cannot engage with the younger audiences because I'm not using the same language, but well, follow them on Instagram, because this is a good initiative to engage with the youth. I'm sure you all know the Netflix series Adolescence. So the younger generation speak a different language. We are young too, but we use a different language. For example, emojis. Emojis, for example, are used differently. So this is a generation gap. We need to make an effort and try to speak what they speak, even in primary education. So my question is also to you, Carmina, and then to Inácia. This is difficult in Spain because there is not a consensus or state policies on the bare minimum. For example, if I talk about this in a high school or in primary schools, probably the faculty will say, I don't know about that. Because what are we celebrating? Franco's death? Because some people say, well, I don't know. But I'm talking about the death of dictators. This is something we should talk about. But no, because you are being opinionated if you want to talk about it. It's like you already have a bias if you want to commemorate Franco's death. What is it like in other countries? Is there a consensus? So maybe you can go now. So me personally, I don't like consensus because we need to listen to everybody with respect, and we need to know other people's opinions, and we need to understand what other people think. Yeah, the generation gap has always been there. You know that the younger generations live like in a continuous present. That is just so normal. That is just natural. But as my colleague said, it is our responsibility. We have to use the language of the youth. When I was young, what my older professors or teachers said, I found it tedious. So it's just natural. We have to follow the good examples. There are some good examples in the textbooks, in museums, but we want more. We want to engage them more because our work is for you. And then, even if we've done a lot because of the type of transition, and I'm not giving you a lecture on transitions or political justice, but some things can still be done. For example, communication. Communicating what has been done. Many people didn't know that in Portugal the political police was tried. And this is unknown to the general public. For example, we haven't talked a lot about the colonial issues because some people are still struggling with that. And for example, we haven't dealt with problems with women and migrants. So we have lights and shades. And we need to talk about some of those things even more, even further. And we need to engage the general public and the younger generations. So they can understand that this is important for democracy today. They need to know what we should be doing in the future.
Otros habéis hecho.
Ignacia, can you tell us about the activities you have been carrying out with young people? Well, this is very easy. We have taken many examples. For the younger ones, one of the things we have done is to speak about censorship. Censorship lasted 48 years. And one of the things they used was a blue pencil. They used to have a blue pencil to censor texts on the media, in theaters. So we had a blue pencil review saying, "My freedom is everyone's freedom." We had sessions with teachers in schools and with children drawing what their idea of liberty, their idea of the 25th of April. Some of them did it by drawing, some others did it digitally. It was great. Another thing we did on social media was a campaign with the hashtag "No podías, you couldn't." Hashtag "you couldn't." We had these cards. You couldn't vote, for instance. We had this card and we explained online how things were until the 24th of April. You could not travel, you could not kiss, you could not be European, you could not this and that. So we launched this on social media, on our website, and we thought that it would not have any impact. We started being called by schools claiming that they had done many activities with the children and they wanted to know more. They wanted to know about new ideas and about things that were conquered after dictatorship. Now we have a different action call. You have powers. What powers have you gained after the dictatorships? After the dictatorship, what did the new democracy bring? And we discussed this online and in conversations with the youth. So these are two examples of the things we've done with them. Cardina, are you taking notes? Yeah, I'm writing everything down. That is very interesting because that's some things done in schools that reach all the way to children, and it's very easy to do. And in that sense, let me elaborate on something you said before, discussing or against what I said about consensus or compromise. You criticize my word, consensus, and you're right. There is not one single memory. Memory is diverse. In times of polarization, political polarization, emotional polarization as well. How can we bring the different memories together? Can we reach a consensus? Can we compromise? Can we have a minimum basic? Can we discuss? Should we speak about a discussion rather than consensus? Maybe we never come to an agreement. This is like deliberative democracy. Maybe we can come to a meeting point, a common ground. This happens in every country. In every country, there are different political parties. There's far right and far left parties, different memories. Spain is a specific case scenario because we had a civil war, but there is disagreement in every single country. So how can we find the common grounds in those different memories? What have you done in your countries? And when you organize events like this, how do you reach out to the whole civil society? Let me say one thing. You were speaking about state policy. A commemoration, a celebration is state policy and is a way to underline something that's very necessary. In the case of Spain, from what they both are saying, I think that these collaborations are trying to find a minimum common ground. We want to have a democracy, so let's talk about the type of democracy we want. And the purpose is to to open up spaces for discussion online or on site like this one. So this could happen in schools as well. One of the goals of a celebration should be this, to open up to public discussion and inviting citizenship to participate. That's the million-dollar question. In Portugal, half a century has gone by and some topics are still painful and there is no agreement. However, some new spaces are being opened up to listen to the different positions in a peaceful way. I do not have a solution for that. I would love to, and that would be great, but we need to keep on listening. Another challenge is not just the different positions, but also the different generations. It's important to listen to the younger generation and to give them the power to ask and the ability to ask. This forces us to rethink our own ideas. They have a different approach, so we must think things over. Another challenge, as I'm saying, is to talk to them and give them a voice.
Idea to, together with your previous question about the young generation and how you deal with different and painful memories, my idea is that you have to give space, you have to listen, and you have to open to different approaches. Even the minimum agreement that we can sit down and even disagree, have different perspectives and express ourselves, it is a basic ground that we have to do. For me, this experience, when I was dealing with the art of Spanish artists, of Portuguese artists, and try to investigate how the revolutionary practice, for example, gave space to more collective practices in Portugal, and the visibility of the body, for example. I found that it was very strong in the case of Portuguese art. And when I saw the collective practices, mostly about printing Equipo Crónica and Equipo and the other different groups of artists who worked collectively, this is practices of people who try to unite their forces under difficult situations and make a result. So for me, history and history of art, it is a ground where you can see how people dealt with difficult situations, political situations, traumatic experiences in the past, not as a lesson, but as an opening up of different perspectives. And for me, this is a very important democratic lessons, not to isolate yourself and your traumatic experience and feel that you are the unique population in the world that went through this painful procedure. This is very important because, we Greeks have another idea, democracy was born in Greece, ancient Greece, of course. Democracy is a Greek word. We feel that we are the unique population in the world according to and following these democratic values. So if you open up the space and you give space for more voices, this is the beginning of a democratic practice in everyday life. And about the young generation, this is what I try to do. Listen to them, and even if the problems that they face with in their everyday life seem totally different than ours, maybe it is always how you communicate with the other, how you place yourself in an environment, social environment, family environment, between your friends, and how you deal with the other. If we can find space to accept the other and feel better, and it's not an enemy, it's not something we have to fear, and it's someone that we can collaborate and discuss with, this is the first win of the democratical process for me.
Sí.
To create the space.
No, iba a decir que el hecho de estar aquí, ¿no? O sea, la importancia de un acto como este nos demuestra lo interesante que es el marco comparativo.
Because it shows how important it is to have a framework to compare, to feel that it is not only our country that had a dictatorship, the only country that experienced bad things. So it is important to compare your experiences with other countries. It is not just about one single political country. It's not about one single country. It is part of different places and different processes. And you mentioned about standing on the other person's shoes. Empathy is essential for democracy. I want to say something that happens very often in Portugal. Many people are blaming the 25th of April for everything, and they're still speaking about the young Portuguese democracy, but the young democracy in Portugal has now turned 50. It is mature, and whatever happens now is our responsibility. Has nothing to do with the 25th of April, or not much anymore. So they keep speaking about the 25th of April revolution. 50 years have gone by. It's time to have a different approach. This is very interesting. You're speaking about compare perspectives. And I do this a lot in class. I have quite some Erasmus students. Some of them are here. And I sometimes ask them about the name of a concentration camp. And everyone would name Auschwitz. And I ask them, was there any concentration camp or a mass grave in Spain? And have you ever heard about Picorreja? Silence. Have you ever heard about the Desbandada? Silence. Have you ever heard about the Carnation Revolution? And not many people say anything. So, what could we all learn? We need a European memory. How much do we know about other European countries, and how much do we not know about them? Do you speak about the Spanish transition in Portugal? A lot. I do speak about this. I do compare them. Greece, of course. Greece is the great unknown. I'm not going to ask anyone here about Greece because I'm sure that you would end up looking up things on Wikipedia. We're all out of the reality in Greece. But how can it be? This is the third wave of democratization, as Smith and O'Donnell used to say. And we are quite similar in some ways, very different in other ways, but we don't know anything about each other. Not to speak about asking a Danish person about our countries. These processes are very interesting, and they are very much related, and we experience them by looking at our own navel, looking at ourselves. Of course, what happened in Greece had to do with Portugal. And the end of the dictatorship in Greece was looking at what was happening with Franco. And in Franco's Spain, we were looking at Portugal and so on and so forth. This is not just about saying that in Portugal there was a revolution. We have to go deeper. Why didn't it happen here? What's the importance of the colonial issue? And in Portugal and Spain, well, the relationship is not always easy, but it's always interesting. In Portugal, they might say that whenever people are criticizing, they might think that they are better than in other countries. Or by comparing ourselves with other countries, we might think that we are not that we are better off. We need more events like this. We need to have more international meetings. We need to show to the outsides and look inside as well. We have to get to know each other. We are neighbors. We're all members of the EU. And do you believe this effort, this endeavor is necessary? How can we articulate it? It is very complicated. So shall I bring you to a panel at an event, or how can we look at other countries' experiences? We can bring in Italy, the 25th of April in Italy, and also France. Yes, indeed. There is definitely a lot of feedback that we can give each other. How can we deepen this common European memory? How can we get to know the others best? How can we understand other people's processes best?
Today is one way we can do things. It's not only this. And maybe communities, right now our period, the era that we're going through, gives us the tools. Through the internet connection, we can build communities that do not exist physically but mentally. So one way is to do it through the technology that we have, but I believe that face-to-face meetings and people working together to create common grounds, it is more important. One of the reasons why European Union does not go very well is this lack, the lack of the cultivation of the European memory. We don't have this, this goal to create and discuss a collective memory of Europe, which will be divided, which will be differentiated, will have through this comparative approach, we will see similarities, and the problem and the important thing is to situate everyone's experience in a collective context, so that you feel that you are not isolated, you are not something unique, but you are unique in your own sense and in your own experience. It is important to situate it in a collective ground. I think this is something that we have to concentrate and think very seriously for the future, if we believe in this union and we want to keep it in a way. To build this collective memory of Europe and democratic memory, which is something that, as I told in the beginning, becomes a crucial part of identity for today. And I don't think that we are going to go well in the future if we don't build in these common values.
That's right. Una de las líneas que estamos desarrollando nosotros desde el comisionado es la de los pasados incómodos, y es una línea de trabajo que nos permite.
Uncomfortable past. We are looking into uncomfortable pasts. And it's also important to say that we are not exceptions, that we can compare ourselves to other countries and learn from other countries and their experiences. It's important to learn from those countries who have already discussed how to create a museum to the memory, how to fight injustice, and so on. So comparing is important to see, to realize that we are not alone, that we are part of a much larger context, and that can also help us learn from other countries' experiences. I agree to everything, but just some notes. All this is a great example of what can be done together. Two archive directors suggested to make a Portuguese and Spanish exhibition on the 50 years of democracy. That is an example. There are many international networks in archives and museums, but we want more, of course. There's an advantage we tend to forget. Many of these young people do not only consider themselves Spanish, Portuguese, Greek, or German, they consider themselves Europeans. I've been teaching Erasmus students. I don't teach that much anymore, but I used to ask people in my class where they came from, what country do you come from? And they used to say, I come from Europe. So that's very interesting. It's very interesting, especially with Eastern European students who claim that they put themselves forward as Europeans. We are mentioning the young people a lot, and it's only us so far speaking. So we have many students here, and you have the chance to have these speakers. And that's a great luxury. It's great to have them here. So you have an outstanding opportunity to ask questions. If you have any question, you can ask. Feel free. Do not be shy. Otherwise, I can speak on and on and on and on. Us, you know. But I know this is very interesting to you. You might not be daring, but this is the right time. We have to give space. We can't say that young people have to speak up and not give them the opportunity to do so. So if you have any questions, if you have any comments or feedback to give us, because this is precisely what the right time for that, or suggestions as well, thoughts, things that can be done as well. Luis has asked, why is it so fashionable to be against democracy? Why is it like a punk attitude to be against democracy? People used to be ashamed of that, and now they just say that like that. People claim to be a fascist or a Nazi, and we hear this from young people and not so young ones. Is it something we can do that? How can we turn the tides? Is it a cycle? Is it going to happen over and over again, and we just need to wait for common sense to come back? Is that the question? Is that what you said, or did I put it differently? I think that in a context like ours, where we have a systemic crisis, we have different authoritarian options that are much more, that are too simple. Enemies are migrants because they're taking your jobs, they're taking your benefits, they are, so they tend to simplify just to point at the enemy. The enemy is those because they are breaking the country and this and that. I think there are two tools. First one, knowledge. Education, the transmission of knowledge, training, education, through the right means, the right channels, and looking inwards as well. And second, the other tool we have is participation, engagement. We might not have the ways to participate, to be involved. Maybe you're not used to making decisions and being part of a project. Maybe we have to expand engagement. And above all, we cannot remain where we are. We have learned from history what happens when you do not react. If you're just waiting for things to go by, we have many examples of what can happen or what has happened. Let me give you an example of one thing we did. We created assemblies. We are doing this year again, but we created some assemblies in different parts of the country with young people. They had to find what they believe is wrong and what they want to change, and they bring those ideas to the local politicians. They discuss this and they feel involved. Democracy is made up by everyone, and everyone has to work to make things change. You probably have much better ideas than we do. And what Sirago said before, democracy is a daily activity.
This, as we said, but I'm thinking that this question I would like to ask myself to a young people and ask for his or her help to make me understand better why fascism, neo-fascism is so in fashion. I believe that one of the reasons is their disappointments of our failures. I mean, we have to think about the generation, the young generation, the 20-year-old persons were born and were raised through crisis. for Greece, at least this is the case. Consequential crisis, financial, pandemic, situations that make them felt excluded from the future. We didn't give them the opportunity to feel that they will live better than their parents. For the Greek case, for example, all the last generations, we had this belief after the Second World War that the future will be better. The future will be better, and it was better. But now, this is the first generation that has this disappointment, and they don't feel that everything is going to be better. It's not easy for them to find jobs, the rents are very expensive. I mean, their quality of life maybe is one of the reasons why they are turning and approaching to extra, outside of the system, of the parliamentary system, the institutional system. And they get disappointed every day about the way justice works, the political parties discuss in the parliament or making decisions. So maybe we have to think about our own responsibilities. I mean, the older generations, why do young people go to that extra fascist and extra right movements? Of course, lack of historical culture and memory is one of the reasons. They don't know what it used to be, so they think it is something that maybe, why not? Maybe we should try even that. So it is a matter of education, a matter of dialogue, and a matter of us to become better so that we build their own trust to democracy. I think that we have ruined trust to democracy a little bit.
You're right. Básicamente lo que ha dicho es, ha preguntado por la experiencia griega y portuguesa respecto a cómo se educa, ¿no? O cómo se transmite su relación con las colonias, ¿no? Es decir, en el caso durante la transición, ¿no? En el caso, por ejemplo, de Grecia con Chipre, o en el caso de Portugal, que era un issue.
The relation between Greece and Cyprus during the transition, and the case of Portugal, how were memories transferred during the transition?
This is part mostly of family, community, oral memory, and the discussions that are done outside the educational system. I wouldn't say that official history, as it is being taught at schools, gives enough space for these experiences to be processed. And this is a lack of our educational system. Of course, as I told you, there are these festivities in the classrooms in our schools every year about the uprising of the Polytechnic School. But I believe that the Cyprus problem, the invasion of Cyprus and its connection with the coup d'etat, the Greek Houda, is still an open trauma, and it has not been processed as much as it should. This is something that we have to work more in the future about the Cyprus question. It is still a divided country. It is still a problem, a very big problem in the international society. And I believe that this experience has not been discussed as much as it should. And contemporary history is not taught very organically in our school system. But, from the other hand, there are initiatives, community initiatives, that discuss community history, community memory, and oral history. And these are other ways and practices, and cultural institutions play a very important role in this area to create other spaces of collective memory. It's not only what the books write, it is how history is appearing in TV series. Sometimes, historical memory is created not by the books, but from a TV star who talks about these subjects. So there are many things and areas that we can work through.
Es interesante porque Bruno no ha preguntado nada de España, ¿no? Podríamos abrir el melón del Sáhara, como no has dicho nada, ahí nos quedamos tranquilos.
Discuss the Sahara issue. We also have this issue undiscussed and unsolved. It is also very interesting, and it's also very little studied and researched. And me neither. I don't discuss this in my class. I don't discuss our colonial past, even the most recent colonial past. You're all invited to come and see the exhibition, because at the end of it there is something about the colonial issues in Portugal and Spain. Not much, but this might give you more this might want you to study more. In Portugal, we also always have to speak about colonization, because the 25th of April was happened to reach democracy, but also to finish 13 years of war in 3 different scenarios, 3 different places. So the first thing is to speak about the war. My students are first year students who made interviews on the colonial issues, and many for the first time found out that their grandparents had been at war. No one used to speak about that. Now they are speaking about this a little bit. Same thing with the end of the colonies, the end of colonization. Some people are still sorry for everything that was left behind, and others said, and that is not the case. The decolonization processes after the World War II. I think there is a consensus that it's horrible to have wars and colonial wars in 1974.
And then the people who returned, I wasn't aware of that. Yeah. Yeah, so people started talking about it, and they have different perspectives on the very same topic. That is interesting. So I want to say that one of the many encounters we are organizing this year will be precisely about that here in Spain. Well, we cannot hear the question, so we have to wait for someone to repeat it on a microphone. Sorry.
¿No les importaría vivir en un régimen poco democrático si eso significa mejor calidad?
We'll try. According to a survey in Spain, people are saying that they wouldn't mind living in a less democratic country or a less democratic regime if that meant more quality of life. So my question is how to involve the younger generations, how to make them aware of what they could lose if democracy is lost. Well, we have kind of improvised. I've been working as a teacher and a professor for 17, 19 years. And the people who work with me in my team are young. I am the oldest. So they can connect, they can engage with the younger generations because they're young. And for example, we also collaborate with an association made up of young people. And they came up with great ideas. So I can see their point of view, and well, this is what we use. We use young people in our team, and the rest we improvise. We try our best, but of course we need to listen to you. Before I get to your question, you see that we are repeating the same data. We are giving you lots of information, but I'm surprised to hear that they might think that they could find more quality of life outside of a democratic regime. What kind of quality of life? I don't know. For example, not being able to hold hands with your partner, with your spouse, or not being able to watch or to see films if they're not censored. What kind of quality of life Is it only material quality of life, having a house, being able to own a house? Well, going back to the second part of your question, we've been involving the younger generations, for example, by involving young people in our team. We have, for example, representatives from the Youth Council. We have, for example, a farmer from the Extremadura region who is very young but is an activist. And for example, we also have a representative from a group called Exiled Youth in the Exile, and they organize exhibitions and encounters with younger generations. These are some of the things we do to try and involve you. And of course, social media, content creators, they are super young and wonderful, and they give us a lot of inputs and insights, and we're open to any more opportunities. I have an anecdote. I was one of speakers at an event in the Ateneo in Madrid, and one of the people in the audience was a student here from Salamanca. He was a psychology student. And he said, I used to live in Argentina. It was a democracy. I used to live in Senegal in a democracy. What is a democracy? What's a democracy like? And I could say, and I said, okay, I could talk about that forever. But that was like an excuse, because some people challenge or question the very definition of democracy. And this is something we can use. For example, Lucia, if you have questions or suggestions as to what we should deal with or we should discuss in our content creation, please feel free. For example, to my students, they have homework, and their homework is to discuss about this in social media, and they should tag us. This is interesting because these platforms are very useful, and the universities can engage. Well, we work with students, we work with young students, even if professors might not be that young, but we are in touch with students all the time. So let's use this. For young people who think that a dictatorship might be better, one of my colleagues used to say, she's the rector of one of the main universities in Portugal, she used to say, I wouldn't be here but for the 25th of April. My parents would have never have me. And I am a woman. I wouldn't be able to go to college. I wouldn't have been able to be the president of a college if it wasn't because of the 25th of April.
Exhibition has finished some one month and a half. So the whole of the previous year, 2024, 7 months, it was devoted to this program. The participation of younger generations was mostly organized through the educational programs, not only the school visits, that we created the space to talk through the artwork about democracy and take their opinions and their expressions, but mostly with the universities. We had a lot of schools from different disciplines, not only history, art history, but sociology, political studies, and either with their professors or with our education workers, because we have cultural workers for educational programs in the museum, we created this spaces and these activities so that they could express themselves and they could exchange ideas. I think that this was the most creative process of all during this 7 months of the democracy project. The fact that we had a lot of young visitors and a lot of young people, and it didn't used to be like that in the National Gallery 3 and 4 years ago or 10 years ago. It used to be not conservative, but a very strong institution which had monumental exhibitions and didn't talk so much about contemporary issues. So opening up the space for contemporary public issues is a way to engage younger generations when you talk about things that are interesting for them too.
Yeah.
And when you try to invite them with different cultural activities, I have realized that when you combine film or music or dance maybe together with fine arts, together with visual arts, this is an opportunity for people, younger people who are interested in different kind of arts, to get engaged with the cultural activities that you organize. So these are some of the...
Thank you. Estoy pensando, a raíz de la exposición de que hablaba Sírago, en el Museo de la Resistencia de Portugal, ¿no? En Lisboa.
In Lisbon, in Portugal, but I think it was prior to the democracy exhibition. When I was there, I was surprised to see many young people. For example, there was an exhibition or a performance about a prison cell, and you could even feel claustrophobic inside, and torture was described. There was even a room devoted to a recreation of a torture. In many primary schools, many students used to attend those performances or their exhibitions, and I think it was very impressive because it was something material, something tangible that they could see and feel. More questions?
Quería preguntar por proyectos, si hacéis proyectos con gente de la generación anterior a la mía, con gente mayor que vivió.
We also try to involve and engage with older people, for example, people my generation or even older. I feel closer to the generation prior to mine than to the youth, and they should feel like they belong to this movement too. I'm not saying they were the protagonists or the main characters of the movement back in the day, but they should be able to feel involved too. The countries? Well, I'll go first. We are organizing like 3 different pathways. For example, we are organizing tributes to people who risked their lives during the dictatorship or even died. In fighting or defending things that we take for granted. For example, last Friday in Grenada we had an event about feminist movements during the dictatorship, and we had invited women who took part in those movements throughout Spain. So yes, we are paying homage to those people. And then we are also trying to digitize some of the sources that we use. In Salamanca, for example, there are records of interviews with women who took part in the transition and in some of the fights, in some of the movements, and we want to make them more visible. Many of them have died, but we could use their recordings, the recorded interviews, to make them more visible. And then we are organizing intergeneration spaces, intergeneration events. we are creating an oral memory project throughout the country. We want to organize interviews between school students and their grandparents, and we want to record them so that we can have clips, audio clips, with testimonies of people describing what it was like when in the 70s or in the 60s during the dictatorship. I think it's a critical issue.
You said, do grandparents talk? Do they answer the questions of the younger generations?
Estamos comenzando, pero por ahora la experiencia es buena, sí, sí. Con o sea, yo creo que ahí sí que hay...
There is a generational shift. For example, they rather talk to their grandchildren than to their children. That generation in the 90s and in the 90s, they studied our revolution, but it is the grandchildren that...
Before democracy, it was called urbanography, and we worked with how the city changed during the last 70 years, and we had a family program with grandparents and grandchildren, and we realized that this is sometimes an easier relationship, and younger children, they like to ask questions to their grandparents and grandmothers, and this is something we have to work more, I believe, this relationship and oral history. Maybe the in-between generation is more difficult. You have the quarrels with your, and the fights with your father and your mother. With the grandfather and grandmother, it's easier.
Yo creo que hemos seguido un camino parecido a lo que van a hacer.
We had a similar experience in Portugal. Of course, those testimonies are important, and we need to record them and preserve them because people are dying. 50 years have elapsed since the beginning of the transition. Our first year of celebration, 2022, we worked on the recognition, on recognizing fights against the dictatorship. For example, by recording testimonies of students that used to fight against the dictatorship, what it was like to be a student back then, what it was like to fight the dictatorship. And two of those students proposed organizing something on our website, like written testimonies or oral testimonies, and we have 50 of them now. I think we're gonna have some more. This is something we should encourage. I have one last example. Last year, we had a pilot project in Seychelles, close to Lisbon, whereby students in a school used to write a book, the free book, that was the title. It was a dialogue with a senior college, a college for the elderly. And they used to talk to their grandparents, and they described what it was like to be a student, what it was like to be a citizen during the dictatorship, and they read the same book at the same time.
Case, the history of resistance against dictatorship is a history that comes from the bottom. I mean, the role of social movement, students' movement mostly, is very crucial. That's why I was mentioning the uprising of the Polytechnic School, which is in the iconography, the art of the history of art against dictatorship is a very central theme, even for traditional artists and for more modern or avant-garde. So the fact that students had so important role in the resistance against dictatorship, I think is very crucial when you narrate the history of that period. And this is why maybe young people feel very close to that history because they see themselves. They see young students who revolted against dictatorship, and this identification is easier. Of course, from the other hand, these people grown up, they became some of them politicians, and now when you talk about all these 50 years that passed through, we say that this polytechnic generation, some people say, a lot of people say, that this generation of the polytechnic school was the one who ruined Greece because of the crisis and the populism, and you think of all that. So it is, now there is another trend in Greece. It's not pro-fascism, but pro-PASOK, pro-socialist. So the 80s is the period that it's being idealized, and it is supposed to be a paradise, a heaven, when everybody had money and everybody was happy. Of course, this is something like a trend, young trend, but all these approaches are a little bit idealized. The fact is, and the important thing is to work through these memories, and I believe very much in the practices that we explained earlier. This intergenerational discussions and taking profit of older people who are still alive and cultivate this culture of oral history. I think this is very important, even for family relationship. It makes stronger the family relationships.
Thank you.
Aquí queda una vez más claro cómo es importante escuchar a los demás y ver la experiencia de otros países.
How important it is to listen to other people and to other countries' experiences, to understand that we are not the exception. This happens in Portugal and in Greece and in Spain. Of course, there is the elites and heroes narrative, but it is never said that the captains of April were your age. They married very young and they had newly born babies. They put their lives at risk as well as the wives' lives. We only speak about the party, the carnations, the flowers, the success. But there's not only that. However, we are taking new steps forward with new historians and new researchers, so bringing in new concerns and new stories. And it's important to celebrate this because it encourages students to work on this. Last question. So the question is, can democracy be at risk when these young people have the opportunity to vote, when they are not that young and they can actually vote? In Salamanca, in schools and also at the government, they are discussing about the possibility to vote with 16, to have a lower legal age for voting. And we've been asking around, and many people think it's a bad idea. Many people think that they are not ready yet. This is counterintuitive. We had this project, we gave them information, we gave them a proposal, and then we asked them, thinking that they would say yes. It's like the idea with no taxation without representation. Same thing. They have the right to work, so they could have the right to vote. And they say, no, we're not ready. They would reject that right, that opportunity to expand the right. They rejected it, and they argued that they were not ready and not knowledgeable enough. So these young people who are not ready might still not be ready when they do have the right to vote. Maybe they decide not to vote, or maybe they have more criticism towards the system. And we are seeing the cases of many far-right parties where they go looking to this type of young person to bring them into those far-right countries. Young people who are open to these narratives, looking for Turkish heads and easy culprits and against migrants and so on and so forth. And it's fashionable to have the fascist anthem, the Spanish fascist anthem, in your phone, and you don't even know what it means. They don't even know what it means. So what are the possibilities we can have without indoctrinating them? How can we reach out to them? You mentioned many activities before, but what else can be done?
I don't have a complete answer for this. This is a new problem, a very important problem that we have to face. One way is information education. We have already told that. The other way, I think I have mentioned before, is that we become more responsible and give them more space to feel included. Because people go to the extremes, and young people go to the extremes when they feel excluded, when they feel they have no future, when they feel they don't belong. So the way to fight neo-fascism, I believe, is to strengthen the democracy. I don't have any other answer to give you. To strengthen democratic practices.
Estoy totalmente de acuerdo, ¿no? O sea, es una parte de educación y de información y otra parte de...
There is the part of education, and then there is the expansion of democratic tool and the participation of people. Regarding educating, there are some myths on Francoism. Some people saying that Francoism meant development and that Franco brought the wealth to Spain. But this is very easy to dismantle. And it's very easy to convey this to the people on the streets. We had a panel where we discussed this. We discussed about the myths, the Francoism myths, about people saying that Franco did a lot of great things, like he did many dams and reservoirs, and even those things that he did right came from plans that were done before. So with very little information, you can dismantle those myths, you can break the myths and that false information. So we had a panel to discuss this, and we also had a collaboration with a digital content creator called Adam Barroso. He's a very young artist, he's a 30-year-old. And the idea is to have them putting with their own words in their language the ideas we were discussing. And there were lots of views, thousands of them in a very few days. The good thing is that if a very small part of the population feels compelled about this and feels curiosity, they will find the video online developing all the different points. So we have to work together with content creators and cultural institutions that can tell these stories, this story with visually or through theatre, through new media, new means, and always expanding the participation, as it was said, and bringing everyone in. You've said everything. And also to take into account that all of history can be a political instrument, not only this, but also ancient Rome and everything. But this recent history is very tempting because it's very alive in our countries. So it's important to inform about this and discuss about this. So thank you very much. And to finish off, I don't know where we will all be in another 50 years' time, but let's have a shorter look into the future. What heritage will future generations think? Or what heritage would you leave behind for the people in 50 years? I would like to work with the Commission to reinforce democracy, basically. If we could manage to reinforce it somehow, and if we manage to break the determination of the people who believe now in totalitarian ideas, if we managed to explain them that things are not black or white, that there are lots of nuances, and if we could break their foundations, that would be great. And of course, reinforcing democracy and conveying the idea, the message that there is room for everyone. Thank you.
From the position of the one that I have the last years as director of the National Gallery, I would like to work in the future towards a more inclusive national institution that has the boldness to talk about even the history and the national identity with more open antennas and talking about our experience together with other experiences. And if we can manage to support and defend these democratic values and the freedom of expression, artistic expression, which used to be granted, but it's not always granted, this is very important, and I hope that this is something that we can offer to the younger generations, that institutions are committed to their role and they work for the public benefit. This is very important for me, to be inclusive and make people feel that this is a national gallery for them, that belongs to everybody.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Compartindo las ideas de las dos comisarias, yo diría que
share the ideas with my two colleagues, and from my point of view, from my professional point of view, I would like to have a reinforcement of historical memory, and with that, a reinforcement of democratic memory that would lead to a more inclusive democracy, more just. But this, the starting point is having more and better knowledge of democracy and our history. And with this, we go back to your question, the question of the in the Ateneo where you gave your talk. And one of the answers to that question back then was to have a welfare state and the living conditions that can allow us to thrive. Thank you very much. We know that the memory is politics, the memory is alive and well, and it goes on. And I hope we can keep on having this type of celebrations, this type of exhibitions. As you know, it opens today. And I hope that you will all enjoy it just like we have. Thanks for helping us convey the importance of this event. Thanks to the speakers for being here. I know we've been here for a long time and we're quite hungry, so we're going to leave it there. I hope you can come back to Salamanca soon. This is your home, and I hope we can celebrate democracy with you many more times. Thank you.